Hello, everybody. Hey, Michael. It is so good to see you.
Likewise, good to see you too.
Well,
Shut down the
this,
distractions here.
so those of you who are tuned in, if you could just confirm that you are able to hear us all right, and then we can get started. There are 12 people already that I can see are there. Can you please confirm if you can see us and hear us?
With a message in the private chat.
Yeah, Bill Long says, hello, everybody. Bill, can you see us? Good to see you. Yes, we can hear you. Awesome. Okay, so welcome to another episode of The What Lies Beneath Ask Me Anything. And with me today is Michael Bolton, somebody who does not need an introduction, at least in the testing world. Well, it is such a pleasure for us to host Michael. And this was cooking up in my head for a long time. And finally, Michael made it happen when he messaged me the other morning. And I was like, yeah, we should do it. And it was a spontaneous reaction. And Bill is already looking at your mandolin right next to you. Well, yeah, of course. We can,
Where do I get to see that? Where do I get to see the comments here?
well, on the right side, not in the private chat, but in the comments section.
Comments. Duh, right, of course. Highlighted a certain way. Oh, look, there's lots of people.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
Awesome. Okay, so without any further delay, let's get started. Audience, this is for you as well. Please feel free to ask your questions. I will begin with some of my questions and then we will move over to your questions. So, Michael, the very first question for you. Michael Bolton and testing go a long way together. So, how did you get started with testing?
Oh. It's funny. Uh, Before I was in the testing business, I was in the theater business. And I was in a school touring company. That is to say, a bunch of adult actors would climb into a van at sometimes as early as 6:30 in the morning, but certainly no later than 8. And we'd drive some distance and we'd go to a school and we'd unload all the gear and we'd put it up and so on and so forth. And we'd do a show and then we'd take everything down, go grab lunch someplace and dash off to another school. One part of that job for me, I was a stage manager. I was coordinating the show and getting stuff places and so on. One of the things for me was I would host a Q&A at the end of the show. And the director of our company said, when there's a Q&A, you're going to hear the same question over and over and over again, but you've got to honor it as though it were the first time that anybody had asked that question. So when people ask me, how did you get into testing? That's one of those questions where I have to say, oh, okay, no, okay. Like many people, I never planned to be a tester. But like many people, I was disposed temperamentally to be a tester because, among other things, my parents instilled the importance of thinking and learning and reading and so on in all of us when we were growing up. I was always curious about stuff and how it worked and why things were the way they were. In the sort of, I was a computer hobbyist, just around the time it started to be cool to become a computer hobbyist in the early 80s. And then I became a programmer as part of the job that I was doing. And as soon as you become a programmer, you've got to become a tester. Absolutely crucial to be a tester because when you're making anything, one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, well, is it what I intended to make? That's one thing. And if you're making it for other people, you've got to ask, will other people be able to get value out of it? Will they be able to use it? And that crosses from it's the computer programming is like the last place where that issue shows up. It shows up in cooking. You've got to taste stuff as you go. It shows up in carpentry, or it shows up in the making of anything. So being a developer of a small program for the headhunter where I was working meant that I had to test my own work, and that I had to anticipate how people might find trouble in it. Right? My job by writing this code was to try to make people's trouble go away. Unfortunately, it seems as though some developers never got the memo and only ever were instructed to say, well, does it do what you think it's supposed to do? And which is good. I mean, it's good for developers to ask that question.
Yeah.
Anyway, after that, that job led to a job in technical support for a fairly important software company, small but important at the time. That turned into a program manager job, but somewhere in between there, I was seconded to the testing group, and I found my people. These were people who were enthusiastic about finding problems in the product. Largely, I think, because having come from customer support, they were very interested in trying to figure out how to make the phone ring a little less often.
Yep.
Back in the day when you used to call people for technical support and expect to get it, right? That was something that's not happening these days. So being a program manager was kind of like being the person who coordinated the work for the project, and the development work and the production work, and interacting with the production people to get the software reproduced and stuff, because it used to come in boxes, and the boxes used to be ordered in box cars of big train loads of stuff. So that involved a fair amount of coordination work. But I was also the kind of the last tester and the first client for the product in a certain kind of way, or at least that's how I thought of myself. And so testing fused that too. Well, to me, that was the most fun part of the work, was to try to find trouble, to help prevent trouble from happening to other people. Not that I could prevent the trouble as a tester, only that I could prevent trouble as a program manager by saying this product isn't going to ship, or this product will ship and we'll deal with the trouble. But as a tester, I can't prevent trouble. So after that, my favorite part of all those jobs was the stuff associated with testing. And I noticed that around the world, I had learned a lot from testing under very high pressure commercial kinds of constraints. And I noticed that a lot of people had these kind of dopey ideas about testing and how testing could really help a project. Yeah. And what's sort of sad is that those dopey ideas have a very long shelf life. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I met James Bach in 2001, started working with him in 2003, became a co-author of Rapid Software Testing in 2006. And I've been focused on not just testing, but studying testing and studying how people do testing ever since.
Awesome. So you've been studying testing for such a long time. Now, as a part of studying testing, something that we've also realized is the importance of, or the distinction between tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge. And so I would like to understand this a little better. And the question that I have is it possible for testers to somehow groom the tacit knowledge that they have, or somehow bring, I mean, be a little better at it, if I may say?
Well, let's get clear on what tacit knowledge is. What does tacit knowledge mean to you?
It means that something that I have learned over a period with my experience. It is more of experiential knowledge. It is not something that I acquire from outside. It is something that comes from within me based on my understanding, my beliefs, or my the things that I have been doing so far. It is something that would be tacit knowledge to me.
Okay. Tacit knowledge, indeed. Much of it is acquired through practice,
Hmm.
through trying stuff and banging up against trouble and revising your awareness and your beliefs about something. But there's another big place where tacit knowledge comes from, and that comes from immersion in society, immersion in a group of social people. Immersion in social people, immersion in a group of people, immersion in a social group is what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
And this is super important because it explains both how people get good at testing, but also how testing can get stuck. Because one kind of tacit knowledge is the knowledge of how we do things around here. What Harry Collins, who's absolutely the source of everything I've got right about tacit knowledge, and the person to go to when I get it wrong, which I will.
And his famous book, of course.
Yeah.
I will put a link to the book in
You
the
mean
description.
this one right here?
Yeah, this one. Yes, exactly.
Tacit and
Exactly.
explicit knowledge. That's an important book in that domain, but another one that's really important of Harry's books is this book, The Shape of Actions.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And both of them are about how we come to do stuff, how we come to know stuff, what machines and humans can actually do. And so Harry breaks tacit knowledge down into three flavors, three kinds, if you like. One is he calls relational tacit knowledge, which is knowledge that could be made explicit but has not been, or maybe in some sense could not be. For instance, we could not make explicit all of the possible 50 move games of chess, such that we could write them down because we'd run out of atoms in the universe on which to inscribe the moves. So there's logistical issues with certain kinds of tacit knowledge, things that we could know, maybe do know, but can't write down very well. There's also relational tacit knowledge of the kind. You have a son or a daughter, Brijesh?
I have a 2-year-old. Oh, he's going to be 3 years in 3 months.
Okay, so you have not yet gone to daycare. What's the address though for your workplace when you go into work? What's the address there?
The address is 47 Kabelweg, Amsterdam.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you'd actually have got that committed to memory. The reason I asked about the kid was
I can tell you the address of my son's daycare as well. So
you can do that.
Yeah.
Wow. What is it?
It's 08 Juliana Strat.
Oh, it took you a moment.
Yeah, it took me a while. Yeah, there are 2-3 streets there. Yeah.
You
So
know,
I get it.
most people I talk to can't tell me that. They can't tell me the address of their kid's school, or if you ask me my mother's apartment number, I still don't know. I couldn't tell you. It's on the 22nd floor, but I don't know the unit number, and it's because I don't care what the unit number is. That doesn't have to be explicit. I know where it is, and I could tell you. If you wanted to go to that building. It's on Jakes Avenue. I don't know the number on Jakes Avenue either, but go to that building, go up to the 22nd floor, and then when you get off the elevator, head east, and she'll have the door open anyway. But anyway, it's the second last door on the right and all that sort of stuff. You can make that explicit.
Yeah.
But there's something much more important, which is for me to know where my mother lives.
Yes.
That other stuff is data. That's relational tacit knowledge. That's knowledge that we could write down, or we could inscribe, we could turn into a speech, but we haven't done it for various kinds of reasons. Second kind of tacit knowledge is called somatic tacit knowledge. And that's the kind of knowledge of how to do stuff that's embedded in a human body. For example, the knowledge of how to touch type, without looking at the keys, the knowledge of how to shift gears on a car with manual transmission, the knowledge of how to kick a rugby ball through the uprights in a rugby game. And that's achieved by practice, that kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
And then there's the third kind, which is the hardest kind. Harry calls it the strong tacit knowledge. Knowledge that's, I think the word strong is intended to denote that it is a kind of strongly defended against being turned into explicit knowledge. And that is the knowledge of how things work in society, collectively determined. That's really hard to make explicit because it's changing all the time, and it gets negotiated between people. It lies in the space between people. It doesn't lie in an individual person's body or mind. So how do we develop certain kinds of tacit knowledge? One, through taking knowledge that other people have made explicit and reading about it, talking about it, and so on and so forth. Second, by practice. And testing work is kind of, very little of it is actually physical, but it is strongly influenced by practice and developing expertise. But there's a third way for testers to develop tacit knowledge, and that is to immerse themselves in social groups where testing and development work are being done. Mm-hmm. Because we learn so much of what we know by immersion in social groups, by imitation, and by sometimes getting the imitation wrong in various kinds of ways, and being corrected, not explicitly, but by sidelong glances and disapproving looks and stuff like that. Kids learn that way.
Yeah.
But nobody hands a kid a book on how to speak. They learn it from immersion in society. So Harry Collins points out that aspect of immersion is super, super important in how people learn to do stuff. We learn things in social groups.
Well, so when you talk of social groups, don't you think social groups are also, in a way, responsible for the propagation of misconceptions that come up, biases and misconceptions?
Absolutely.
So how do we get around that?
Well, we do that through processes of trying to figure out what we want, trying to figure out what's good, trying to figure out what serves people and serves each other, and by reflection. I love chatting with you, Brijesh, because you help to stimulate these kinds of notions and ideas and working our way through this stuff. But it seems to me that it's at the intersection of developing knowledge and then looking at it critically, self-critically, and then with a group. We're asking yourself, okay, what could be wrong with this? How might we be getting this wrong? How might we do it better? And that starts with a notion of what's good.
Yeah. And
there's a podcast I was listening to just recently. It's from a couple of years back, but it's all these Harry Collins books immediately at hand. This book. And Why Democracies Need Science. It's yet another Harry Collins and Rob Evans book. Harry makes the point that in the 1950s, in the West especially, Science was judged to be a good thing because it had helped win the war.
Yeah.
Win the Second World War. The good guys had won because science had helped us to win a war. But Harry says that's not why we should honor science, because bad people can win a war too with technology.
Yep.
It has come to his attention, and it makes such wonderful sense when he runs it down. Science is good because it's good. Its focus is on finding things that are true, in finding things that are real, in trying to sort out what can be trusted and what can't be trusted. So it's an extremely efficient and worthwhile mechanism for distributing trust. Now, because of that, in a world that we have, like the world we have today, where trust is at a premium because of the advancement of social media, electronic media of all kinds, sort of anticipated by McLuhan, that as soon as we started communicating with each other at light speed, we would be able to communicate disinformation as quickly as information. And we're trying to figure out how to sort that out right now. We're in the middle of a multi-generational effort to try to figure out how we're going to cope with this a blizzard of information that we're working with, and how we can sort out from that what's to be trusted, what's not to be trusted, what's true and what's not true, what's good and what's not good. We're figuring that out, and Harry reckons, and I agree, that science has the institutional principles that would help with that a lot. And that's it. It doesn't take very long listening to this podcast before you realize, oh my God, that's what testers do. Good testers do in a project. It's our job to be kind of the scientists, the experimentalists, the truth seekers about the product, such that people can make whatever policy decisions they like. We're going to release this product, or we're not going to release this product. We're going to put this feature in. We're not going to put this feature in. But what we're trying to achieve are certain kinds of truths about the product that are simply facts. People can make policy decisions whichever way they like from those facts. But that's really exciting to me. That validates what we're here for in a really fundamental kind of way.
Well, so that brings me to an interesting thought. Well, so you've spoken about the science behind testing. Some people talk about testing being a craft. So is it really science, or is it craft, or is it something in between?
Well, science and craft are very similar, right? I mean, they're for instance, there's some scientific. There's some craft scientists, some people who literally work in little cottages and do scientific work from there. James Lovelock springs to mind. Amazing character, 101 years old, I think, at this point. Still sharp as a tack. He was asked by NASA many, many years ago to try to figure out how would we reckon up whether there is or has been life on Mars. How could we do that? And as a scientist, his thought was, well, wait, if there is life, it would be using the atmosphere as a medium of transmitting stuff around, because life needs stuff to be moving, kind of. So he said, if we look at Earth, is the atmosphere of Earth chemically stable? And what's weird is, of course, it isn't. If there weren't living forces on Earth, there would be an enormously less free oxygen, almost none of it, in fact, I think. but there's lots of it. So why is this? Well, it's because there's life pumping carbon dioxide into the air, taking oxygen out of it, and there's a cycle by which all that stuff happens, and so the trees take in carbon dioxide and spit out oxygen, and other stuff takes in the oxygen and metabolizes other stuff, and all this stuff happening. He says, well, if you can see that on Mars, if you can see elements in the atmosphere or molecules in the atmosphere that should not be there, then you've got a marker of life. Well, this guy, he also invented an incredible instrument called the electron capture detector, which allows you to identify trace amounts of stuff of various kinds in the atmosphere to the level billions or trillions of parts per million. Well, this fellow's a Kraft scientist. He does not work in research institutions. He doesn't work in a university or for a big company or anything like that. So science can be craft as well. So testing is both. Testing is both science and craft.
Well, so do you think in the race for tools and automation and AI and all of that, are we somehow losing sight of the craft of testing?
Well, skilled craft people use tools. Skilled craftspeople create tools. But skilled craftspeople are not identified by the use of a particular tool or by fascination with technology. They're using tools to get the job done, whatever job it is they want to do.
Yeah.
And it is a mistake to believe that the tools do the work or can do the work. It's a mistake to believe that the tools will work outside of the context of a skilled person wielding them. And we are, speaking of, social groups, we are in a tool-obsessed world in software development. And there's nothing wrong with the idea of using tools to do work. It's just a natural thing, a normal thing. But this fixation and fascination we have with tools can be dangerous because tools amplify whatever we are. So if we are incompetent, tools allow us to do incompetent testing faster and worse than we've ever done it before. If we are skilled, tools enable us to do more skilled testing. If we are reflective, tools help us to look at ourselves. But if we're oblivious to what we see in the mirror, then tools help us to be more narcissistic, not more narcissistic, more unaware. But if we use tools as a mirror, tools can amplify either our narcissism or our self-reflection. But the tool is agnostic to how you're going to use the mirror. The mirror is agnostic as to what you're going to use it for.
Yep. Here's a question that I have. I want to get back to you on the obsession part of it, but here's a question that we have from Niger Test Crowd. How much of usefulness is tacit knowledge to testers? Are we at a point where we actually consider this a valid skill to have?
Well, tacit knowledge is not a skill. Tacit knowledge is what we know without it being made explicit. That is, turned from something that we can think or know or do into a string of bits, something that we can render as sound or as drawing or as text, something that has been made explicit is something that has come from our tacit knowledge somehow or another. Tacit simply means not spoken, not told.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we say of how much usefulness is tacit knowledge to testers, Well, it's like saying how much usefulness is knowledge to testers, right? Now, it's funny because Harry makes this point. It's really interesting to me because it helped me to recognize something very important about scripted and automated approaches to testing. I'm debating on whether or not I should show you a picture of it because that could help as well. Let's look at it this way. There used to be just knowledge. We didn't write stuff down. Most people were illiterate. In fact, up until fairly recently in human history, all humans were illiterate. And then priestly castes became literate, and merchants, developed a certain kind of literacy and so on. But there was just knowledge. And then somebody noticed, there's actually two kinds of knowledge. There's knowledge that's been written down, and there's knowledge that hasn't been written down. And they pointed out that, Harry points out that what this means is, obviously, explicit knowledge is dependent upon, Harry used the word parasitic. It's a parasite. It depends on its existence or something else. Explicit knowledge depends on tacit knowledge to exist, right? You can't have explicit knowledge without tacit knowledge. But then he makes this really fascinating point, which is that you can't have the idea of tacit knowledge until you have explicit knowledge. In other words, until people started writing stuff down, nobody realized, there's knowledge that we don't write down. And they started to call that tacit knowledge, you see. So similarly, in the early days of my career, testing was framed in terms of what had been written down about how to test, how to get the testing job done. Scripted testing, formalized testing. Well, you don't need scripted testing because there's testing, right? There's just testing. And then somebody realized, there are certain aspects of a test that we can write down. We can make that explicit. So let's talk about now scripted testing. But what was funny about it was that the idea of scripted testing displaced ideas about testing, and people started to get fascinated on the scripted aspects of it. Similarly, and I make this point in the movie that I did in the video that I did in November. People had this idea about testing. Okay, so how can we use tools to help? I know. There are parts of testing that can be automated. The part where we mash on the keys and move the mouse around and compare the results to something described and explicit and desired, presumably, something we anticipate to see, something we want to see. We could automate that. That's automated testing. And so people became fascinated by this. Now, of course, they're wrong. It's not automated testing. It's automated keyboard punching. But what happened was, since they started calling it automated testing, there was this sort of ghost, a germ of an idea in their heads that said, well, what about that other, there is other stuff, right? What do we call that? Manual testing. Right. What's the opposite of automated? Manual. Okay. We've got automated testing and manual testing now. All right. Then something even worse happened, where they said, let's take automated testing and say, what would that be like without the machine? Well, that would mean people punching keyboards slowly. That would mean people moving their mice inconsistently, because the machine always goes to exactly the same point on the screen. And it would mean people looking stuff up unreliably, because, people are terrible at looking stuff up and comparing this to that. They get bored and tedious and so on. So in their minds, what they did was they took all the good stuff about testing and removed it. That's the first thing. So you take this, let me give you an image of it if I can. I can share my screen using this wonderful facility. Can I not? Okay, share your screen. Screen sharing tips. Lordy. Share screen. Share screen is easiest with 2 monitors. No kidding. Share screen. All right, so this is the screen I want to share. Share. and you'd see this lovely royal purple thing, right? Is that what you're seeing right now? You're seeing
Yes.
purple. Okay, good. So this won't take very long. And this is a diagram that is in development. It's not, I'm not done with it. So you're seeing kind of preliminary stuff here. But let's bring this up. Come on, PowerPoint, help me out. There we go. So here's the world of testing, okay? Here's the world of testing. Come on. There we go. Over, right screen. Come on, screen right. Let's go. Come on. Stop it. The technology gods are not being kind to us here. Why is that the case? See, here's a bug I'm encountering right now, which is the Windows key, just over the last little while, has suddenly stopped working on my machine in a reliable and consistent way. But we can make this happen. It's okay. Let's try this. Come on. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Make this go away. See, this is exactly the sort of thing that is kind of obnoxious to me, because this is testing right here. This is a result. Okay, there we go. Got it. And that's not even the thing I wanted to see. I wanted you to see this. All right, there we go. So this is sort of don't pay attention to the colors for now, at least. There are things here that are illustrated as cloudy things. Those are human, social, cognitive, intellectual, mind-based stuff, discussion-based stuff, skill-based stuff, and so on and so forth. And then in the pointy gear-like images here, we have things that are to some degree mechanizable. We can make these things mechanical. Now, let's look at one specific aspect of that. Let's look at automated checking and put our focus on that. Now, if you make the mistake of dismissing everything else, ignoring everything else, ignoring all the other aspects, and then you take the machine away from it, what do you end up with? You end up with automated checking without a machine, which, of course, because it doesn't do things the way machines do things, is slow, reliable, or unreliable. This is what humans do. See, they're slow, they're unreliable, they're variable, they're unpredictable. They you just can't depend on them. They're no good. But what that does, alas, is that it completely ignores the fact that automated checking is only one part of testing, and it pushes everything out to the shadows. And that is the essence of the problem that I see, Brijesh, in answer to your original question, which is the fascination with tools. Is our focus on tools appropriate? I don't think attention to tools is a bad thing by any means. We should pay attention to tools, but we should apply critical thinking to our application of tools. Like, for instance, I have been noticing, and I've been collecting some research from some testers who are good at this stuff, who are really good at the automated checking stuff. They purport to be, they claim to be, their experience, their track record shows that they're good at it. I got them to automate the user interface. Notice how I didn't say automate the testing. Automate the user interface for a program that James has been using in the Rapid Software Testing Applied class. Yeah. And it took hours to program the machine to do the simplest little thing that a human could do. But it did it successfully. The fellow doing it did it quite successfully. In terms of, yep, you can make the little pop-up disappear. It's programmatically tricky to do because it shows up kind of unbidden. And you could program the machine to grab an element on the screen and move it to a certain place. It's cards, Kanban cards on a screen. Yes, even though the machine is constructed in a way that's it looks almost as though it was intentionally designed to be hostile to tools. This guy came up with a way around it. That's fine. But James asked him to do something much more complicated, which is to deal with 1,000 cards. You know, imagine a Kanban board with 1,000 cards. And then we can do some stress testing, and then we can do some exploration of what would happen if for some reason, let's say we created 1,000 cards and archived all but 30 of them, which is something that happens normally on a project, right? You get a card, you use it for a little while, push it around, move it, change it from place to place, change title, change stuff on it. Supposing we could get machinery to do that, then we could have a test. Well, the thing doesn't work. The GUI automation doesn't work after you get to about 6 cards because the cards start disappearing off the screen. So you expand the screen, right? You do what a normal human being would do. You get up to 12 cards and say, oh, I can only see 6 of them. Let me change the resolution. Let me zoom out. And the automation completely loses track of where the cards are because the automation doesn't understand what a card is. It just understands, go to this point on the screen. Now, there are people who say, oh, well, AI will take care of that problem. And my response to that is yes, and so will flying cars take care of the problem of traffic in Bangalore. It's not going to happen anytime soon. And it is far more complicated than people think to do that. And meanwhile, we've got testing to do. We've got work to do trying to find problems that actually matter to people. And the issue is that trying to write programs to simulate people is, I think, pretty dumb. A much smarter thing would be to write tools that help us test. So, for instance, a great way to get to where James wanted to go is to go to the API for this product. Or if you can't go to the API, at least go in underneath the GUI and keep track of where the cards are going to be yourself and create those things that don't depend on the visual part of it, which humans can do in a heartbeat, right? We can do that instantly. We can sort out where the cards are and where they need to be and how to make them go someplace. But if you want to generate 1,000 cards, write a loop to generate 1,000 cards and then stop the automation and let the human play with the system in that state. And if you wanted to change a state, then get the automation to change the state for you. But don't try to do it through the GUI. That would be my strong advice. Strong advice. We're getting up to commercial time, aren't we? Oh, Brijesh has just disappeared. This is untimely. There he is.
I am back. It suddenly showed me that something has gone wrong.
Oh, goodness.
Well, back again.
Yes,
So,
it's commercial time, isn't it? It's
yeah. So there is. So we have a small video from one of our sponsors, Testworks, and they. So let me. All right.
That went by quickly.
Yeah, that was 46 seconds, I guess.
Well, it's it's okay because automation can make sure that each one of those companies that they listed as one of their supporters is on there. It's I'm I would like to offer to the TestVox people, make that a 60-second commercial. Nobody will mind being able to read the stuff that's on it. It went by mighty quick.
Yes. Well, so since we were talking about obsession first a short while ago, I want to yeah, Gaurav also gives the same feedback for test box. Play the text a little slowly. well, so talking about obsession, there is an insane obsession about test cases. I know that you have written a 12-part blog series of asking testers to get out of that obsession for test cases. Why do you think that obsession is, and what can we do about it? Or how can we get rid of it?
The obsession exists, I think, from two prominent sources. One is that the idea of a test case makes testing legible to testing outsiders. By legible, I mean readable, understandable. I see. This is what happens during a test case. In the same way that a recipe makes cooking legible to non-cooks, right? It,
Yeah.
it's a it. So you see, this is what cooking is like. You just get these ingredients together, and then you do these things. But what people don't realize about cooking and cookbooks is the amount, once again, it comes back to this issue of tacit knowledge that's involved, right? When somebody says brown the meat, or when somebody says get the dough to the point where it is flexible in your hands. Well, dough of any kind is flexible to some degree. It takes practice and skill, and often it takes experience and watching somebody else do it, and it takes sometimes getting the feel of the dough and learning what dough that works feels like and dough that doesn't work feel like. I make bread, and it's really interesting when I look at the cookbook for the bread, how much the author of the particular cookbook that I learned a lot about bread making from took great pains to make as much as she could tacit knowledge kind of stuff explicit. And yet it still takes practice and experience to know when the bread is at the right consistency, and know when you've got, for some reason there's not enough water, even though it's all measured out to be exactly the same. A flour doesn't respond the same way to water, depending on the flour and depending on the amount of gluten in it and depending on the well, those are the two big things anyway. And depending on how long it's sat and that sort of stuff. So the cool thing about test cases is that for somebody who doesn't understand testing, you can point to this and say, look, here be testing. This is what testing looks like. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that when having been trained that that's what testing looks like, managers ask for test cases.
Yes.
So testers keep supplying them because testers, they want to satisfy managers, give them what they ask for. So testers keep supplying them. So managers keep asking for them. So testers keep giving it to them. So managers keep asking for them. So testers keep giving it to them. So testers keep asking for them. Testers keep giving it to them. And that cycle just continues. And nobody pauses for a second to say, you know what? This is not the testing part. The testing part, you think and what you do and how you respond to what you see. It's how you interpret the experiment. It's how you use the experiment to gain new insight. But there's nothing in a test case that says, perform this step, perform this step, perform this step, perform this step, observe this result, and then recognize that there's something wrong with the product that's completely unrelated to the result that you've been told to look at.
Yep.
Nobody recognizes how important that is if they're fixated on test cases. So that's what I want from the world, kind of, to recognize that test cases are not testing. James and Aaron Hodder, James Bach and Aaron Hodder wrote this wonderful essay called exactly that. Test cases are not testing. Testing is performance. It is performing the active testing, the actions of testing. Again, that Harry Collins kind of thing. The intention to find problems. But here we've got these test cases that make testing very legible. And then managers look at that and say, oh, there's a step, 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 and there's a lookup thing. Why can't we automate that? And as Christian points out, also test cases give testers a tangible artifact of output. That's right. We can point to the test case and say, see, here's something we're going to do. And then later on, see, here we did that. My contention is, why don't you do something and then produce the see, we did that part? Because you never know what you're going to find. You never know what insights are going to occur to you. You never know what you're going to explore. Now, Christian has this exactly right. This can be very reassuring to lots of people because we've got something that we can show people, we can demonstrate to people. And James and Aaron's article makes that point too.
Yes.
That what do programmers produce? Programmers produce code. They've got a visible, tangible thing. And as Christian points out just now, the value of the in advance value of a very specific and very prescriptive test case is very low, it seems to me, mostly. Much more concise expression would help because it would simultaneously take less time and it would help not to over-focus the tester on the steps in the test case. Because after a while, the goal becomes go through the steps instead of learn something and find problems. So I would love it if our community could get over that fixation.
But how do you convince the managers then?
Oh, I don't think that's actually very hard. I've done it lots of times. Lots of times I've done it. Here's what you do. You bring them the goods. You bring them what they're really interested in, which is problems that threaten the value of the product. A long time ago, I watched James doing a class. I was sort of studying how he did it. It was a conference presentation, a conference tutorial, something like that. And he said, look, it's like this. I want to find so many problems in the product. So many problems. And I want to find them so quickly. And I want them to be such important problems that as soon as I hand them to the managers are going to go to the developers and say, what the hell? We've got all these things to do. We've got all these problems to do. It says, I want to get them all tied up in knots, trying to solve the problems I've discovered. If I can do that, they'll leave me alone. They'll leave me alone. And they will do that if you're bringing them what they want to know, which is knowledge of problems that really matter and that are going to threaten the value of the product. Now, here's James chiming in. The main thing is to convince the managers to let you control your own job. And I think the golden key to that task is to do your job. And your job is to find problems that matter so that the people who are building the product can reckon, is this product that we've got, is this the one we want, or do we want to fix it? While they're off busy having that argument, I'll be finding even more problems. And so when they come back to me and they say, well, we really want to see test cases, I'll say, here, before I give you the test cases, here's a bunch of problems to sort out. And then, the whole test case thing gets dropped right away.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that Christian is bringing up, which could be useful if they're like super skeptical and they're not inclined to observe, is to turn the lens on the work.
Yeah.
And to show them how much work is being consumed by stuff that ends up not making a difference.
That is correct.
Lots of ways of illustrating that, but a simple way to do it, it seems to me, for testers, you could track two things. One of my favorites is when you find a bug, put a little score next to it. It doesn't have to be super precise or super accurate, but the score goes something like this. Give it a 5 if the test case was absolutely essential to finding the bug. There was no way you could have found this bug without the test case. Give it a 4 if the test case was sort of mildly helpful. Give it a 3 if the test case was neither helpful nor unhelpful. Or you can put it on any scale you like, right? +2 and -2, that sort of stuff. But then keep track of the number of times the test case actively inhibited you finding the bug, which is, if I were paying attention to this test case, I would never have found this bug. There's lots of cases where that's been true for me. If I had been focused on this thing, if I'd been focused on this procedure, I would not have found this bug. And then, you can even take a suite of test cases and say, of these test cases, these took so much time and so much effort that I can guarantee you that if I had not been racking up the opportunity cost associated with creating this stuff, then I would have found problems that I worry now might still exist in the product, but which are too deep for me to get at because I've run out of time, because I've been wasting time maintaining all this, all these test cases. And that goes double. That goes double for automated GUI code. Or maybe triple, or maybe quadruple, because not only do I have to track the test case, but I also have to track how the machine is going to instantiate the work. And that takes time and effort, and it's buggy. I don't know what our problem is in software development. Our solution to buggy, unreliable, somewhat untrustworthy products is to write somewhat more unreliable code.
Well, so how would you handle this situation, which Richard points out too? He says, would companies accepting testers' testing notes as billable work?
I don't understand the question.
So what companies look for often is billable work, and they see test cases as something tangible which they can measure, and then they can say, okay, this is the billable work, or for this thing, for a certain number of test cases, I can get paid. So can testing notes be used for getting paid? Do you think?
Sure. And divining, a video of me using a divining rod to try to find oil, that can also be counted as oil exploration work. You could do it that way, but I prefer not to do fake work. I would prefer, testing notes is a little unclear to me. If it's testing notes that reflect what I've actually done, and those testing notes do not detract significantly from the work I've done, they're going to detract to some degree, because I can't test and take a note on my thought process at exactly the same time and at no cost. Now, what I can do sometimes is I can log testing work, right? I can show log files that demonstrate that these activities were performed, get the machinery to do that. Or I can produce a video that shows the work I've done. But what I want to do is I want to keep the bureaucracy and the paperwork down to a minimum. I don't deny for a second that companies want evidence that work is being done. That's fine. Companies probably want evidence that testing work has been designed, conceived of, strategized thoughtfully. They probably want evidence of that. And that's part of the cost of doing business. But to produce test cases, test case documentation like that, where I'm outlining, okay, these are all the things I'm going to do. And then here's some evidence that I did them. And here's some evidence that I took evidence that I did them, and so on and so forth. Let's not do that. Let's instead say, here's what I'm going to do in terms of a charter. this is the area I'm going to explore, and these are some of the things I'm going to look for. Here's an outline of where I intend to look, but not to be too specific about it, because then I can spend more time actually doing the work and producing what my clients want to know about, which is my clients want to know about problems that threaten value. That's
Yeah.
the thing.
Well, so there is a question that has come for you, which is what are the top skills which you would look for in an experienced tester apart from tools, expertise?
Well, one is to be able to describe and illustrate testing work, to account for testing work in a concise and responsible and reasonable way that stands up to scrutiny. So that's one skill. And I'd have to say, by and large, if you look over the landscape, testers, alas, are not great at that. By and large, it's something that we really, I think, need to sharpen up in the craft. The skills of note taking, good note taking, those are skills that I would look for. Producing high quality lab notes, like scientific researchers do. So that's a good thing. Assessing cost and value and describing that in testing work. Tracking the trio of cost and value and risk. And the capacity to identify different dimensions of cost. And it strikes me that we need to, James and I need to do some work on revisiting that. Kem Kaner in the black box software testing class has some good stuff on that subject. But let's take stuff and do a deep dive on it and study it a little bit. Whenever we talk about a test, there is time it takes to develop the test. Now that can be instantaneous and spontaneous, or it can be much more detailed and much more what's the word? It's struggling finding my words. The coffee is not working yet this morning, so I have to do it. Much more deliberative is the word I'm looking for. We can say, okay, I'm going to scrutinize a certain aspect of the product, and in order to do that, how am I going to do that? And that requires sometimes reflection and experimentation just to figure out how we're going to examine this question. So there's development work that goes along with that, and the development work might include developing tools or developing processes and developing procedures, and that might take itself some experimentation. So there's development cost associated with a test. There is a maintenance cost associated with a test. If we're going to reuse any aspect of that test, any aspect of it at all, then we're going to have to figure out how to store and retain and maintain stuff associated with it, keep it up to date and keep it relevant. There is, as part of development costs, there's also troubleshooting and debugging and costs associated with, getting the experiment right. Then there is also a transfer cost. If we're going to take what we've got and impart it to other people in some sense, here's a test that we can perform. Here's how, here's what you got to know in order to do this. Imparting that to other people can take a certain amount of time. There's execution cost. Now, the reason people are so excited about automated checks is their execution cost is low, right? It happens really quickly. But development and maintenance are enormously expensive when you've got a changing product, and products are changing all the time. There's also interpretation cost, what it costs to figure out deeply what the outcome of the test means. That's a cost that doesn't get marked down very much, right? That we don't notice that. There's support costs associated with it. There's equipment costs associated with a test. And the big one is opportunity cost. For anything that we're doing now, what is that preventing us from doing? Right? So for instance, if I'm in the middle of developing some code in order to check a certain aspect of the product, that takes time away from me actually checking that aspect of the product by some other means. And I'm not saying never do it. What I am saying is, let's think about the cost and the value of doing it, and whether that value is going to play out in terms of the cost that we're expending, or the effort that we're expending on making it happen. So evaluating cost versus value is a big deal for testers.
Another question: how can testers know if they're getting better at the craft? Is that awareness also tacit knowledge, or we can make that explicit?
James and John Bach and I developed a set of testing skills and testing tactics and testing practices, things that we do in testing, that we can use as kind of a decoder ring, a tool for breaking down and analyzing testing work. And the answer to the question is yes, we can, by doing that kind of thing. You don't have to use ours, but develop your models of testing and of testing work and of services that we provide to people, and evaluate them ourselves, evaluate them in our group of testers, and evaluate them with respect to our clients. And as our clients express greater and greater degrees of satisfaction, then we are getting better at our craft in that sense. But let's not fall into the trap of fooling our clients and fooling ourselves when we think, things must be good. Look, we're producing more test cases than we've ever produced. Right? To me, that must mean we were getting better at our craft. No, not quite. Not maybe even not at all. We've got to look at each one of those things in terms of how it affects the other things. So another really good skill for testers to develop is the skill of general systems analysis, analytical skill. Thinking about how, when we change some aspect of some set of meaningful relationships between things, when we change one element of that, how the other things have to change, or how the other things are affected by that, how the other things have to change in order to keep the system stable, how something new destabilizes a system that we've got, which prompts us, I would hope, to look at these things in relationship to each other. So the study of relationships like that is important thing.
Well, so here's this question: how will you explain a 7-year-old about what is testing and what exactly do testers do?
Well, I've actually done that, but I've done it with 6-year-olds.
Okay, so 6-year-old.
It was so much fun. It was great. I went to my daughter's grade 1 class, which was usually a French immersion class. So the kids are in French all day. But in library time, when they went down to the library, English was okay. And so the teacher of the class invited me in to talk about my work and what I do. And so I said, you play games on your computers, and you see stuff, and you see your parents using computers and using software, and then also, when you're watching TV, there's computers that help get that stuff onto the screen. And when you pick up anything that got made these days, a lot of stuff gets done by computers, and they know computers. They've been surrounded by them all their lives. And this little thing in my hand, right, where I can call uh, mom, that's a computer too. So when people are making these things, sometimes they have problems in them. They don't get it right the first time. And so what I did was I wrote a little Ruby program, and I showed them what a program looks like. And this is a program that prints the word bunny and gives you a count of how many bunnies there are, based on how many you want. So the prompt comes up, how many bunnies? And so you say 3, and it says bunny, 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 and then it says 3 bunnies. Okay. So I said, how does that look? And they said, yeah, that's great, bunny. Okay, I get it. And then I said, all right, so let's try it with 0 bunnies. And it says bunny, and then it says 0 bunnies after it. And the kids will say, "Wait, if there was 0, there shouldn't be any bunnies."
Right.
And I said, "Oh, well, we'll have to fix that." Now I said, fixing is not testing, but testing is trying it out to see if there are any problems with it. So okay, I'll fix that. 0 bunnies, and I fix the error in the code that puts up a bunny when there's a bunny. 0-based indexing or something. I didn't tell them about a 0-based arrays and all that sort of stuff, but so I fixed that, and then I said, all right, now let's well, what else do we try? And so he says 1. Okay, so 1, and it comes up, it says bunny, 1 bunnies.
1 bunnies.
1 bunnies. And the kid said, no, that's wrong. So I got to fix that. So and now I special case the single bunny, and that's exactly how I describe what testers do. I might say testers light the way, but that's a little abstract. What I will say though is that it's testers' job to try these programs and see before the program goes out to the bigger world, the people who are making the program try it out internally, and it's a tester's special job to try that in ways that will expose things that will make the programmers look bad, or that will make the program look wrong, or make the program be wrong. And you know what? That's straightforward. And this is not kids are natural testers, right? They're always trying stuff. Yeah. And there's a wonderful article in The Economist a few years ago referring to some research that some researchers did, which if you tell kids too much about a toy, they'll only use that part of the toy. But if you give the kids the toy and say, hey, figure out how it works, they'll go nuts on it, right? They'll find all the different behaviors in it. But the researchers discovered that if you tell them about a particular feature, they'll interact with that feature and they'll get bored with the toy much more quickly than if you give them the whole toy to explore and say, here, figure this out. Then they'll go nuts.
Well, my son discovered more ways of getting to the YouTube app than we would normally have taught him. So yeah, that's how kids do it. He just picked up my phone and started playing and figured out his way. So
well,
nice.
I'm seeing Gaurav's response here that like a mother checks whether the milker is hot or not before giving it to her kids. Well, that's true, except the mother does so much more than that, right?
Yeah.
The mother will check whether the milk is too hot, whether the milk smells off, whether there's some dirt, some residue somewhere in the cup or the bottle, all these things that a mother does that do not involve, by the way, going through a list of steps. Right? The mother picks all that stuff up, and that's part of the mother's tacit knowledge. That's part of and the fathers, I might add, by the way, because dads, certainly where I come from, dads are helping to feed the kids too. So,
well, so we all know about your love for the banjo, and we can see the mandolin right next to you. Um, well, so in playing that musical instrument and between testing, have you seen any parallel? Have you seen anything that you could pick up from that craft and maybe that has been useful to you as a
Yes,
teacher?
I love that question. Yes, um, there's so many. Number one is uh, it takes practice. It takes practice, and your practice is enormously enhanced by having a coach, having uh, having a mentor, having people to admire, people whose work that you can see and that you want to be like. That is enormous as well. Um, the fact that music is fundamentally a social activity. It's performed by people for people in groups of people mostly. There are some very talented solo musicians, but very few musicians spend their whole lives playing entirely solo and so on. Um, that in Irish traditional music, which is the gang that I hang out with, um, there are there is a collective tacit knowledge, and some of that has to do with the style of the music and how the music is played, and some of that has to do with how you behave, how you act as a person in that social group. There's politics, and there's cultural considerations and social considerations, and one of the funny ones is uh, if you do something inappropriate, culturally inappropriate, socially inappropriate, um, because the rules are not written down, you might not be aware of them, and you will blunder. And I've done this lots of times. And not only will you blunder, but if you break the unwritten laws, you will be tried and convicted in absentia. Right? So that's really interesting to watch. Now that I'm a more sort of um, experienced player, watching the social dynamics of how that stuff works out is really interesting to me. And to some degree, when those social dynamics are unhelpful for newcomers, for example, I try to help the newcomers in to some degree. But then, even for me, if the newcomers are too, if they don't fit somehow, I will, I'll let them know once or twice if they're, the senior people are going to get pissed off if you keep up with that. So, like, somebody's playing too loud, or they're not playing in the proper style, or that sort of stuff, if they don't fit. But it's really interesting to see what happens when somebody doesn't fit in such a way that even my capacity to deal with it it doesn't work. I cease to become welcoming at that point. And then what's funny, of course, is social forces dominate too, because there's some people who are just not very good, but because of their stature in the community and the things that they do to help the community along, they get something of a blank check for certain kinds of things. It's fascinating to watch.
Well, we've got a few more minutes, so I think we have room for a couple more questions. So, guys, if you have more questions for Michael, please to send uh, type your questions.
I
In the
noticed
mean,
that there's a parallel thread going on with James, which is an interesting role reversal, because this is the opposite of what happens in the rapid software testing applied classes. James, participants in the class and I will have a side conversation while James is talking. So this is an interesting little reversal.
I was fortunate enough to be in one of the classes taught by both James and you, and it was quite interesting as to how the conversations were going on when James was teaching or when you were teaching a part of it. Then there would be side conversations building up. So
Absolutely.
it's,
Absolutely.
it's always fun. Well, okay, so here is a question which comes in from Joe. Joe asks, nowadays the test goes wrong too far. How can we apply RST's mindset to the community? Their mindset stuck at ISTQB and it seems feel difficult to change this. Can you give me an advice? Says Joe.
Yeah, I think one of the better pieces of advice, I think James has said that his dad said this to him. The first time I ever saw it was Steve Martin, the comedian. The advice that he gives to people is, listen, just be so good they can't ignore you. That's the key to the kingdom. I mean, anytime we see, and it happens in music too, right? Anytime we see somebody in the Irish music community, somebody who's at the avant-garde, bringing in ideas from outside, for a while there's great turbulence because the traditionalists, want to keep stuff the same. They want to preserve what's valuable about the tradition, and there's something really important to that. Right? There's something really important to the idea of preserving the nature of the tradition. And then there are people who do stuff every day in ordinary ways, and they don't really care about the tradition of the avant-garde or anything like that. They're doing their thing and they're enjoying their stuff. A very talented musician explained this to me once, because I was asking, what do you have to have for a tradition? And he says, you need those three things. You need the avant-garde, the people who are stretching the boundaries. You need the staunch traditionalists, the ones who don't want things to change. Because the reason that we've got a tradition in the first place is there's stuff that people preserve from that. And then we need people who are doing the work every day. And I think the way to make progress is for, as happens in the music thing, when somebody comes along who is so good that they can't be ignored, then things will shift ideally in a way that will preserve what was important about the old stuff and will take advantage of the new stuff. There's until the 1970s or so, in Irish music, there was very little emphasis placed on certain kinds of technical skill, purity of tone and all that sort of stuff. It was dance music and it was raucous, and it was designed to sound a certain way, and people would play out of tune and nobody would mind that. Well, this guy named Kevin Burke came along in the 1970s. He had classical music training to go along with his Irish cultural background. And he made it possible for people to realize, oh my God, we can have instruments that are in tune with one another and have all the stuff about the traditional nature of the music, that the jump and the lift and the strong melody and all that sort of stuff. We can put those things together and come up with something that's even better. And now it's sort of fairly accepted that this older, rawer kind of stuff is still important to know and to hear about. Yep. But it helps us to frame how we got there and where we can go with it. So to Joe's question, do good work. And the good work, it seems to me, is by whatever means necessary, find problems that matter, get them in front of the client, and then tell them about how you did that. And to the degree that old stuff helped, acknowledge that, honor that. But to the degree that the old stuff got in the way, make sure they're aware that the old stuff got in the way, if that's what the deal is.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Here's a question from Sachin. Reaching out to such amazing place where people refer to your thought process and your teaching to grow. Now, what's your aspiration in life? What do you want to achieve and want to be?
Oh my God. Well, let's can we take these trivial little questions and put them aside and get on to something that's hard to answer? Session. That's a big question. Here's what I want to achieve. First of all, the first thing I want to achieve is I want a good, happy life for myself and my family. And that means, for me, that means trying to help other people get good, happy lives for themselves and their families.
Yeah.
That's a that's a big deal. And I'm not very good at the second part. The only way that I might be good at it is by, well, maybe taking a page from Jerry Weinberg's uh, philosophy, which is helping smart people to be happy.
Excellent.
Now, I asked Jerry at one point, wait a minute, what about helping happy people to be smart? And Jerry said, well, if you're happy, you don't need to be smart. So,
He's right.
yeah, I mean, not entirely. Like if you're happily hurting people, if you don't care about hurting people and you're happy doing that, I don't think that. I think it'd be better for you to be a little smarter.
Yeah.
But I can see what he means, and so part of helping smart people to be happy, it seems to me, is helping smart people to use their smartness in ways that will help to spread happiness for other people. And it's an awkward job right now to do that for testers. It's always going to be an awkward job because the first reaction that we're going to induce in people most of the time, not always, but most of the time, is unhappiness. Because here's a problem in your product that you're going to have to fix. And so that's going to be the initial thing. Now, one time, for example, when I was describing a bug to a developer who I respect very greatly and who is a wonderful friend of many years now, 35 years, he I report this bug to him, and his reaction is, wow, what a neato bug, right? Every now and again, sometimes he'll get that reaction, not all the time. So compassion and empathy are really important with that. We've got to recognize that that's going to be an issue. So I want to continue to, as long as it's in my power, I want to continue to help testers get good at what they do. And I want to help them get good at what they do, because the better they are at what they do, the more happiness that will generate in the long run, despite the fact that we've got this unpleasant little task of having to point to people things that are not quite right about what they wanted, not what they intended, or not what the customer would intend.
Well, so here's a question from Richard. What kind of tools do you think would greatly help the testing community, which aren't currently mainstream?
Well, we've been talking about that a lot. James has been sharing with me a little bit his ambition for the work that he's doing with Tricentis.
Yeah.
And the tools I think that we need most of all are tools that help us to coordinate evidence of testing work, and that help us to make invisible things more visible. Tools which help us to press keys on keyboards and move mice and look up results and compare them to each other. We've got more than enough of those, and I think they are shaping testing work in a really bad way because they're focusing us on the key branching. That's just not the important part. The important part to me are tools that help us to see things that we couldn't see otherwise, that help us to generate data, that help us to frame and explain and describe our work to our clients and to ourselves, for that matter. So think in terms of stuff that will allow us to see and visualize data, that will allow us to generate data. Tools that will help us to keep track of what we're doing, and help us to keep organized, and help us to recall stuff, look stuff up, account for our work. Those are really important.
Well, okay. I think we have a minute more. Let me see if I.
Well, okay. First thing, before I go, or before we go, I don't have a deadline here. I've got my wife is out with my daughter. My daughter's learning to drive. They're picking up groceries. They've got errands to do. I've
Okay,
got all afternoon. But I do want to. May I be so crass and commercial as to put in a pitch?
please go ahead.
All right. There's a rapid software testing explorer class coming up the 12th to the 15th in Europe. James has a rapid software testing explorer class coming up for Asian time zones in May.
Yeah.
And you can look all those things up on rapid-software-testing.com, on my website, on James's website, developsense.com for me, satisfice.com for James. There is we have commercial breaks at 45-minute intervals, and that was your second one. And now we can
Well,
spend the rest of the
that was
afternoon on this.
that was one of the questions from Prashant, and I was going to say that I will add the links to all the classes to the description box of this video so that
Oh,
you
excellent.
can get it. And I was going to do that anyways, but thank you, Michael, for doing that little pitch. So since we can go a little over time, let's do that. Here's a
I need
question.
people's help, by the way, in broadcasting that, right? So
Yeah,
that, it's nice to be able to look it up, but tell your managers. So,
and I think in our audience we already have Balaji who's already signed up for your class, so he's pretty excited.
mhm.
He did
Yeah.
tell me about it. The moment he signed up for your class, he puts in a message on Telegram and says, "You know what? I'm going to be in Michael's class in April." I'm like, "Yay!" So
Looking
that's
forward to having you.
yeah, that's the excitement level. Well, Kshitij has a question which I had for you towards the end, but it's good that he has asked. What would you do if you were not a tester?
I I really don't know. I mean, I got into this line of work by a certain kind of happenstance. Um, I like uh, I like spreading ideas, so it would involve something to do with that, I imagine. I had a career in theater, which I really enjoyed in retrospect, because the performance aspect of it, I didn't have to do too much performing, which meant that I didn't, I was not part of the performance part of the operation. But being a stage manager involved lots of problem solving. The logistics for our shows were incredible because we had a kind of insane production designer, insane in all the best ways. He would design these hugely elaborate and complicated sets so that when the kids came into the school auditorium or the school gym, they would see something that looked miraculous. We had a full-sized, the kids' climbing structures, playgrounds, and stuff like that. We had one of those which we could put together in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was just mind blowing to see. And we had full light and sound rig associated with that. So there were lots of problems associated logistically with getting that going, and it was a continuous process of refinement because every tour would start with the putting the set up. That would take an hour and a half, and eventually we would get it down to the point where it'd be a 20-minute thing. So that was always fascinating to me, that kind of problem solving and figuring out how to make things smooth and quick and prepared so that we could do stuff efficiently. So it might have something to do with that. I love playing music. It'd be fun to be paid for it. It'd be terrible for it to be a job, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I really don't know, but it would involve dimensions of all those things. Mostly, I think, though, spreading ideas one way or the other, spreading awareness of thing that I see in the world that I think are wonderful. That it would involve something to do with that.
Awesome. I have been looking at, of course, the books that are behind you, and every time I see you at your desk, and I'm like, wow, these are such wonderful books that you have, and you always have this. You turn around and you fetch a book immediately. But today, my attention is all focused on the mandolin that you have right next to you. I know that before we got started, you were playing a little tune. So I'm going to ask you if you can play a little tune for us now
Well,
on
I'm
that
not
mandolin.
warmed up, but we'll see.
Wow, thank you.
I might not even use the string, but we'll see.
That was awesome. And now, obviously, looking at the comments, you definitely have more fans of your music, just other than me. Marlon is there, Sachin, of course, and we know a lot of other people. Uh, Richard obviously had a question. Uh, is this
Yeah,
a
freestyle.
freestyle?
Um, not. I mean, I'm not making it up as I go. Although it's kind of fun to do that sometimes. I, I've always wondered if I sat down and actually thought about it, if I could record a tune, or if I could develop a tune. And I suspect that I could, because their Irish music is very strongly patterned, and there are certain sort of phrases that you put together, and it seems to me that writing a tune is a process of just keep trying to keep doing it, putting little bits together, almost like Lego bricks, until all of a sudden you have a something you like. You try something, see if it works for a while, throw it out. Uh, Try something, see if it works for a little while, change a little bit of it. This process of successive refinement. And I think I could do that, but I've never tried in any kind of formal way to do it. I could noodle. Um, so yes, now play some "How Am I Supposed to Live Without You" Marlon. Yes. And Marlon, feel free to fire your writers. Okay, if you want.
Well, so coming back to some serious questions now. That was awesome, by the way, Michael. That was also serious, I know. But some questions that we have. What is the current book that you're reading? Asks
Oh,
Sudesh.
there's a few of them. I always have a bunch of books on the go. I can't seem to. For me, a book is a something on a buffet table, right? It's like that. But one book I'm looking at the moment, a little bit, and I know that I should be paying more attention to it because um, a colleague of ours told me about it. This is a book called Think Again: The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know by Adam Grant. I'm looking at that one right now. I read this a long time ago and skimmed it a long time ago, like a couple of years ago, and skimmed it. And I realized now I should give it a much more thorough read. Downstairs, I have two books by Tim Harford, the economist. One is called Messy, which is The Power of Disorder. And the other is The Data Detective, which is about how to think more clearly about statistical and quantitative information. Have I got anything else on the go? I just finished this book, which is it's crazy, yet another Harry Collins book called Gravity's Kiss, which is the kind of final chapter in his 45-year involvement with the gravity wave physics community. And there's a note in here, in one of his notes, that struck me as just extraordinarily relevant to testing, the testing community. Note 15, if I remember correctly. Oh, this is really important, actually. And this is important for testers. Interactional expertise. Interactional expertise is a kind of expertise in a domain that allows you to speak the language of that domain without necessarily being able to contribute to advancement in that domain. So I guess one thing I should note here is a mistake that I made when I first heard the term. I thought it referred to the skill of being able to interact with people, but that's not what he means. That is an important set of skills, of course, right? In order knowing how to socialize and be polite, and how to listen, how to speak, and so on and so forth. But interactional expertise is a degree of expertise. Contributory expertise is the expertise required to practice or advance the craft in some sense. Interactional expertise is the level of expertise required to talk with people who can do that stuff, right? To talk with the contributory experts to the degree that you might actually even be able to fool them into believing that you are a contributory expert. So for testers, this actually becomes really important. We need to be able to observe and speak the language of and interact with experts in many domains at the same time. In the domain of programming and technology on the one hand, and in the domain of the business or the space that the product is supposed to be placed in. And there's a mistake, I think, that many testers make, and it's not a hard mistake to make. It's a mistake of believing that you understand what the user will get from this product, what the user wants from this product. And because the focus from the builders of the product and the culture that we're immersed in, which is the culture of using computers, we can make the mistake of believing that all that's required for user interaction and user experience is stuff associated with where stuff is on the screen and where you click and so on and so forth. But to do deep testing on something, certain kinds of deep testing, I should qualify that. To do certain kinds of deep testing on something requires you to become an expert in the domain in which you're testing. So, for example, if you're testing financial software, there's stuff you've got to learn about finance that it's okay. You're not going to become a banker, a financier, or an accountant or a quantitative analyst at some firm. You're not going to get up to that level, probably, but you've got to aspire to get to that level such that you can have reasonable conversations with the people who are doing that work. And Harry raises the point that his belief, and I think he's right, that testers don't do that often enough because it takes time.
Yes.
It takes time, and it takes immersion in that culture. And one of the things that we have as a kind of problem in development shops is that our development shops are isolated from the places where the work is being done much of the time. And so it's hard for us to immerse ourselves in that kind of work. Now, we can do little bits of it. Like one of my favorite stories is Oliver Wilson, a tester in Estonia. When I first met him, he came up to me and he told me this beautiful story about how his employer had sent him off to the work site. And the work site was for emergency responders and a telephone center, right? You in North America, it's 911. In the Netherlands, I think it's 111 or something. 112, right. So you got an emergency and you need help right away. So Oliver was sent to a call center and just sat next to these people all day long and observed what they were doing and listened to what they were doing and watched what they were doing. And when they had any downtime, he would talk to them about what they were doing, and he would go out on breaks with them. He'd go to lunch with them. He would have beer in the pub with them after work. He'd eat dinner with them and that sort of stuff as much as he could to try to get into their worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the insight that came from that was mind-blowing and expanding. And as a consequence of that, when he went back to the shop, to the development shop, he had a much richer set of ideas about that. And it seems to me as testers, we've got to lobby for that. We've got to lobby for that opportunity to immerse ourselves in the world of the people who are using the product. And we shouldn't fool ourselves into believing that just because we're sitting in front of a computer, we have a sufficient expertise to test something really, really well, when that something requires a certain kind of expertise. So working with people in those domains is really important, it seems to me.
Awesome. So Richard had a question. James mentioned this topic in one of his talks, sense making and testing. I think it's something that testers have to do often. I wanted to hear your take on it. How do you approach this?
Well, the first thing that's helpful for me with this is to once again to take advantage of other people's analysis and experience of it. And so that pertains to yet another book, which is just over there. It's in the W, so it's hard to reach. Might as well grab it. Why not? It's by Carl Weick. This was a mind blower for us. I think James and I were talking about it in 2007 or 2008, maybe even earlier, 2006. Sensemaking in Organizations. It's a bit of a pain in the ass to read this book because he keeps putting the citations to other work in line instead of. I want to take, dear Carl Weick, please meet your new friend, the footnote, because it really derails your flow as you're reading this book. But nonetheless, it's an excellent book in terms of, the points that he's making. He points out that sense making has these 7 dimensions. Let's see if I can remember them. One is that it's grounded in identity construction. So sense making is something where grounded in identity. Why do academics talk like that? What he means is, as we're doing work, as we're doing stuff, we're continuously saying, who am I and what am I doing here? What's my role in this? So we're trying to figure out, as we're trying to make sense of something, we're trying to figure out who we are. That's very important in the process of sense making. Second is that it is ongoing. That is, it's happening all the time, but it's also retrospective. We're looking back on what just happened. So simultaneously, we're looking at what's happening right here and now, but we're also trying to link it with what has happened in the past. It's social. It happens in groups of people. Sense making is a very largely a social process. It is enactive of sensible environments, which is one of the other elements he has about it. What that means is, as we're trying to make sense of things, we are also trying to create an environment in which sense making is possible. So we're trying to figure out stuff, and we're trying to figure out how to make it easier to figure out what's going on. It is focused on and by extracted cues. That means that we're getting hints from what we're seeing from the affordances in them, like everything that we are taking in is focused on the sense we could make of it. An extracted cue sometimes takes the form of an affordance, like a handle or an element on the screen that you can click on. And through repeated sense making, we learn, oh, there's something you can do with that. And so after a while, something that looks like that starts to emanate this sort of do something with me, or learn something from this, right? We extract knowledge of what to do next from these things which kind of shine out at us based on prior sense making. So it's iterative process. It's interesting because he doesn't mention the loopiness of it, the fractal nature of sense making explicitly in a way that I remember. He might do it. It's also focused on plausibility rather than accuracy, which means for us, it's a heuristic process. Yeah. It's based on things that could work, but that might fail. So as we're trying to make sense of something, we're not trying to get anything utterly conclusive from it. We're just trying to see, well, does this fit? Does it fit well enough for us to believe that we've understood it? Thinking about those things and just becoming aware of these little moments in sense making, I have found myself helpful in cases where I'm stuck, especially, for instance, the social part. Right? If I'm stuck on something, part of the process of sense making is to try to figure out from people around me, people who are accessible to me in some sense, experts or people who have experience with this thing. And sometimes it confounds us both. Like, just as a trivial example, James and I were trying to figure out how a particular data structure was being picked up by some code that I was working with in a certain API. And so we were having trouble making sense of it. But I turned to James's expertise. He's a programmer of longer and deeper experience than I am. So, well, he was puzzled, but he was stumped by it too. So we worked it out. So there's the social dimension of it. But also, the retrospective aspect of it. Okay, I'm trying to figure this out. Well, what's it like that I've seen before? And when I say, what's it like? That's the plausibility rather than accuracy thing. Whether instead of saying, what is it? I say, well, what's it like? And it could it be like this? Would that help me to make sense of it? So those little things, if you're conscious of them, those little notes help you to get traction sometimes when you're stuck.
Awesome. We have uh, I we have one more question, and I think there are people already saying good night. It's bedtime.
Yes. Well, it is for lots of people. I mean, I'm very honored by the attention and the dedication that people have to sticking around for this stuff. So that's lovely. Thank you. Great compliment.
Yeah. So one question that comes in is, what would be the one thing that you want to change in the Agile Manifesto?
Well, let's start with the things that I want to emphasize. And it leads to actually one thing that it might come up on the list, and that is that let's pay attention to the thing at the very bottom of it, which is while there is value in the things on the right, we value the things on the left more.
Right.
Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Well, okay. First of all, I think they were talking about process models.
Yes.
Because processes okay. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Let me tell you something about being a programmer, which I've been more and more over the last little while. I've been writing some tools to help facilitate the class. Some people read that as working software over working software uber alles, right? A working software over everything. No comprehensive documentation. In fact, while we're at it, no documentation whatsoever. If you look at a documentation, especially open source documentation, it seems to me, by and large, there are some exceptions, but by and large, it's a toxic waste dump of terrible documentation, practically non-existent, but certainly unhelpful, in the sense that it's always written from the perspective of the insider, that is, the perspective of the person who wrote the code, and almost never from the perspective of somebody who wants to get the job done, not somebody who cares about how the code works, because often that shows up more often than not. But how does it help me to get something done? Examples would be a really, really good thing.
Right.
So I worry sometimes that comprehensive documentation, they mistook it for comprehensible documentation and then just threw the whole thing out. So I would advocate for that. Let's remember that there is value in the items on the right, and we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater there. I would obviously have liked to see something more about the critical aspects, the self-critical aspects about software development, how important it is to have a questioning process in what we're doing, to ask some important questions, to frame some important questions for testing. And lately I've been on a little bit of a thread about this. Number one, as we're building stuff, it's fantastic for testers to be involved early and to be involved all the way through. As a tester, I'm not fussy. If you give me something to test, the first thing I'm going to the first thing I'm not going to say is, "Well, why didn't you give it to me before?" Or "Why didn't you let me participate in the design of this thing?" That's not my business. I will say it would help if I were involved in the design of it. I offer my assistance on finding problems at any stage of the operation. That's fine. But let us ask these questions continuously. What are we building? Who are we building it for? What could go wrong? And how would we know? Let's start with those 4 questions. But then let's go around again, second time, and ask, what else are we building? Who else are we building it for? What else could go wrong? And how else would we know?
Yeah.
Having done that, then there's a third loop, third go around, which is, what are we not building? Like, what do we need to build that we're not saying? And what are we forgetting to build? Or what are we consciously saying we're not going to do that? Second, who are we not building it for? Like, who might we have forgotten? And who do we want to make sure it can't get at it, can't make use of it, like hackers, for instance? What could not go wrong? Well, as soon as you raise a question, well, what couldn't go wrong? Then you might raise the possibility of, well, actually, that could go wrong, right? So we'd surface that, and then how would we not know?
Yeah.
Right? How might something go wrong without us being aware of it going wrong? If we started to ask those questions, so somewhere in there's something useful, I think. Would I put it in the Agile Manifesto? I don't know, but to be more concise about it, I would put something in about we're continuously reflecting on what we're doing and what we've done, and looking at that with an eye for how things could go wrong, so that we can avoid trouble for our clients and for ourselves ultimately.
Exactly. Well, awesome. Well, we've done 2 hours. It's 10:30 in India, and I think it's almost midnight in Singapore. So
Just
I,
on noon here.
I really appreciate people for staying up so late.
Me
Michael,
too.
you have been really, really awesome. I am so happy that we did it, and I am so thankful to you for being brilliant as always, and for that wonderful piece of music that you played for us. That was awesome.
Oh, that was the Congress reel and the Silver Spear for those keeping track. But thank you, Brijesh. And what triggered my waving at you and say, "Hey, I'd love to do one of those too," was your conversation with Marius.
Yeah.
And that was just absolutely tremendous. Here's a funny thing, though, too. What lies beneath is very close to something that my wife or her brother, I think it was my wife, identified as what should be our family motto. Because stuff around the house is always lost, right? We can't find stuff, and it's always underneath something. So we thought of this idea that if we were going to have a family crest or something like that, it lies beneath would be the motto.
So my idea for this title came because we see a lot of people doing a lot of stuff, and we focus a lot on that is outside, and we focus very little on what goes on in the background or what lies beneath that. So we all have read your blogs. We've seen you here, you at conferences. But this kind of candid conversation has actually brought out, different dimensions, according to me at least. I mean, I wouldn't have thought of listening to a small mandolin recital from you. I have heard about your banjo, and I saw a small clip in the Ustef video which you did on manual testing. But then this was like exclusive, and being an exclusive audience to something which is just awesome. Well, so thank you so much for doing this. I really want to thank the audience for sticking around for those wonderful questions. And I want to promise you one thing, that we are going to have more and more guests coming up. The next AMA will be announced soon, so stay tuned. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, and also join the test chat community. There is some awesome conversation going on. I know Michael has made a few guest appearances there, uh, with a couple of comments here and there, but James is there and
Yeah.
is very insightful. And so, yeah, on that note, I want to thank everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. We will keep talking, and we will, of course, come back with more. Maybe
Let's
we
hope.
may, maybe we do another episode of What Lies Beneath, part two or something like that.
It would be a
Create a
privilege. Thank you.
awesome. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye bye.
Bye.
Namaste.